"A housekeeper," Judge Duval said, his voice dripping with a silky, amplified disdain. "Protesting what, exactly? That your mop buckets are too heavy?" The gallery, packed with reporters, chuckled. Josephine stood perfectly still. She waited for the sound to die. Then her voice, clear and cold, cut through the room. "My name," she said, "is Josephine Eliza Carrington, and I am the lead plaintiff in Carrington versus Apex Holdings." The silence that followed was absolute. The smirk vanished from Judge Duval's face. The reporters, frozen for a second, erupted into chaos. The Charleston humidity was a living thing. It clung to Josephine Carrington's skin the moment she stepped off the bus at the corner of Broad and Meeting, a corner known to locals as the Four Corners of Law. On one corner stood St. Michael's Episcopal, representing God's law. On another, the City Hall, representing city law. The third held the federal courthouse, representing federal law. And on the fourth, the J. Waties Waring Judicial Center, representing state and county law. It was this fourth corner that Josephine approached, her stomach a cold knot of dread. She was late. Not terribly, but enough to matter. Her first client of the day, a wealthy lawyer who lived in a sprawling, 3-story historic home south of Broad, had insisted she stay to repolish the silver. "We're having the partners over tonight, Josephine. It must be perfect." There was no "no" in her job, not if she wanted to keep it. So she had polished, her hands aching, watching the clock tick past 1:30 p.m. Her hearing was at 2:15. She'd had to run to the bus, her work bag, heavy with eco-friendly cleaning supplies, banging against her hip. She hadn't had time to change out of her uniform, a simple dark navy polo with the "A Brighter Day Cleaning" logo embroidered on the chest, and practical black slacks. Now she was navigating a media circus. Reporters, photographers, and camera crews choked the wide stone steps of the Judicial Center. They were a frantic swarm of suits, microphones, and glaring lights. Josephine tried to slip past, her gaze down, practicing the invisibility that was part of her trade. Judge Duval, a comment on the Apex brief?" A sharp voice cut through the din. Josephine's head snapped up. Judge Andre Duval was striding up the steps, insulated by 2 deputies. He was immaculate in a charcoal suit, his silver hair perfectly coiffed. He looked like the descendant of senators, which he was. He gave the press a tight, practiced smile. "The court speaks through its rulings, Ms. Pierce. You know that. But your family's investment firm holds shares in an Apex subsidiary, Your Honor." The same reporter, a young, tenacious woman with a shock of red hair, pressed on. "Isn't that a conflict of interest in the class action?" Duval's smile tightened into a glare. "That is an outrageous and unsubstantiated allegation." He pivoted and disappeared through the heavy oak doors. The red-haired reporter, Marigold Pierce, cursed under her breath, scribbling in her notepad. Josephine watched him go, her heart hammering. That was the judge. Not for her case, surely. Her case was small claims, courtroom 2B, a failure to comply with a lawful order citation. But that judge, Andre Duval, was the man presiding over the most important thing in her life. The case that had consumed her for 3 years. The case that was named after her. Carrington versus Apex Holdings, LLC. She clutched her summons and pushed her way inside, the reporters barely registering her. To them, she was just a woman in a uniform, a background extra. The hallway inside was chaos. The Apex case had put Charleston on the national map for all the wrong reasons. Apex, a predatory lending and home repair company, had systematically targeted elderly black homeowners in the Lowcountry, offering critical repairs, financing them at impossible rates, and foreclosing on generationally owned homes within months. Josephine's own mother, God rest her soul, had been one of them. She had died of a stroke 2 weeks after the eviction notice was nailed to her door. That was when Josephine Carrington, housekeeper, had become Josephine Carrington, lead plaintiff. She found her way to courtroom 2B. It was a smaller, less ornate room, but it was still packed. She realized with a sinking feeling that the reporters, having lost Duvall, had followed the only other story available: the protester docket. Her citation stemmed from a small, peaceful demonstration outside the Apex-funded Community Revitalization Office. Josephine checked in with the bailiff and sat on the hard wooden bench at the back. She saw her lawyer, Thomas Morelli, up at the front, deep in conference with the prosecutor. Thomas was young, barely 30, a public interest lawyer who ran on coffee and righteous fury. He had taken her class action case when no one else would, and he was representing her on this minor charge pro bono to ensure the prosecution didn't try any funny business, as he put it. At 2:30 p.m., the door at the side of the room opened. The bailiff called out, "All rise, the Honorable Andre Duvall presiding." Josephine's blood turned to ice. It was him. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was a circuit court judge. Why was he handling the afternoon infraction docket? She would later learn that the scheduled magistrate was out with the flu, and Duvall, enjoying the media spotlight from the Apex case, had offered to help out, ensuring the reporters who had come for him would get to see him in action. He settled into his chair, the black robe making him look larger, more imposing. He scanned the room, his eyes lingering on the press row where Marigold Pierce was already typing furiously on her laptop. He was performing. "Let's get this show on the road," he sighed, picking up the first file. Case 299A, City of Charleston versus David. Josephine watched him, her hands trembling in her lap. She had spent 3 years studying this man through legal filings, through depositions, through stories from other lawyers. She knew of his family's deep roots in the city's power structure. She knew of his reputation for impatience and his barely veiled contempt for the people who appeared before him. She had just never expected to be one of them. Judge Duvall moved through the docket like a man swatting flies. He was a blur of bored expressions and impatient rulings. A young man with trembling hands, up for shoplifting baby formula, was given a lecture and the maximum fine. "Poverty is not an excuse for theft, son. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps." An elderly woman cited for a broken taillight was berated for wasting the court's time when she tried to explain she was on a fixed income and couldn't get it fixed until the first of the month. With each case, Duvall's eyes would flick to the reporters' row. He was giving them exactly what they wanted: sound bites of a tough-on-crime, no-nonsense judge. He was crafting his own narrative, right in front of them, to counteract Marigold Pierce's sharp questions on the steps. He was a man of the people, you see, a man who protected the community from the people sitting in the pews. Marigold Pierce just kept typing, her expression unreadable. Josephine felt Thomas Morelli slide onto the bench next to her. He didn't look at her, his eyes fixed on Duvall. "What is he doing here?" Josephine whispered, her voice barely a breath. "Guest starring in his own drama," Thomas muttered back. "He's image rehabbing, showing the press how he handles the little people. Don't worry, this is a simple citation, no jail time. We'll plead not guilty, ask for a bench trial date, and be out of here. He won't even look twice at you." But Josephine knew he was wrong. The moment the bailiff called her name, Duvall did look twice. Case 301B, City of Charleston versus Josephine Carrington. Charge: failure to comply with a lawful order. Josephine stood and walked to the defendant's table. Thomas joined her, placing his briefcase on the polished wood. Duvall leaned forward. He peered down at Josephine, his gaze taking in her simple work uniform, the small, faded logo on her chest, her worn but clean sneakers. His eyes, which had been bored all afternoon, suddenly lit with a kind of cruel amusement. He had found his perfect prop. He ignored Thomas completely. He didn't ask for her plea. He simply stared at Josephine. "Josephine Carrington," he said, drawing out her name. He picked up her file, a single sheet of paper, and pretended to study it. "It says here you're employed at A Brighter Day Cleaning?" "Yes, Your Honor," Josephine said. Her voice was steady. "A housekeeper, is it?" Duval asked, leaning back. He steepled his fingers, looking not at her, but at the reporters. Marigold Pierce had stopped typing. Her pen was poised over her notepad. "Yes, Your Honor. I'm a residential and commercial housekeeper," Josephine said. "A housekeeper," Duval repeated, as if tasting the word. "And you were arrested at a protest. Tell me, Ms. Carrington, what does a housekeeper find so pressing to protest? I wasn't aware the city had passed any new ordinances regarding bleach?" A few sycophantic chuckles echoed from the front row. Thomas Morelli stepped forward. "Your Honor, my client is here to enter a plea, not to be cross-examined on her profession, which has no bearing on this citation." Duval waved a dismissive hand at him, his eyes still locked on Josephine. "I am trying to understand the defendant's character, counsel. It seems to me a woman like you, a working woman, would have better things to do than stand on a street corner shouting slogans you don't understand." The condescension was suffocating. He was painting a picture for the press. Look at this simple, uneducated woman, led astray by forces she can't comprehend. Look at me, the firm but fatherly judge, trying to guide her back to her mops and buckets. He saw her uniform, and in his mind, she was already convicted. Not of the citation, but of being beneath him, of being invisible. The same invisibility that had let her pass the press corps unnoticed was now being used as a weapon against her. Josephine felt a slow, cold anger replace her fear. It was an anger she knew well. It was the same anger that had fueled her for 3 years. The anger of being dismissed, of being underestimated, of watching men like Duval destroy her community while smiling for the cameras. He was right. She was a housekeeper, and she had cleaned up messes far bigger than him. The air in the courtroom was thick and still. The only sound was the scratching of Marigold Pierce's pen and the quiet whir of a ceiling fan that did nothing to move the humid air. Judge Duval leaned even further over the bench. He had the full, undivided attention of the press. He was in his element. "Let's talk about this protest, Ms. Carrington," he said, his voice dropping into a tone of paternalistic disappointment. "You were part of a group blocking the sidewalk in front of the new Palmetto Prosperity Center. Is that correct?" "We were on the public sidewalk, Your Honor," Josephine stated clearly. "We were not blocking. Officer Timmons's report says you were," Duval snapped, tapping the paper. "It says you were chanting, holding signs, and when he asked you to disperse, you refused." "He asked us to move from a public sidewalk, sir. I tried to explain that we had a right." "You tried to explain the law to a police officer?" Duval's eyebrows shot up. The smirk was back, wider this time. "A woman like you, in your uniform, deciding you know more than a sworn officer of the law?" He was hitting every note of his performance. Class, race, education, authority. He was painting her as an uppity, ignorant menial who didn't know her place. "Your Honor, this is badgering," Thomas Morelli interjected, his voice rising. "If you're going to proceed with an arraignment, then let's have it. Otherwise, this is a clear abuse of the bench, and frankly, it's bordering on..." "Bordering on what, Mr. Morelli?" Duval's voice went sharp, his eyes flashing with genuine power. "Contempt? Are you threatening this court? You would do well to remember your place, just as your client should." He turned his full attention back to Josephine. The cameras were flashing now, tiny, silent bursts of light. They were capturing every second of her public humiliation. "You see," Duval continued, gesturing expansively to the reporters, "this is the problem in our city. People who have no stake in the community, no real understanding of commerce or law, think they can just disrupt. They think they can disrupt businesses, disrupt the peace, disrupt the very fabric of our society. He looked directly at her. That prosperity center you were protesting? It's bringing jobs to this city, good jobs. Maybe even a job for you, Ms. Carrington. Something better, something with a future. Instead, you're here, in my courtroom, wasting the taxpayers' money. He shook his head, a mask of profound disappointment. It's a tragedy. A woman like you should be focusing on your family, on your work, not on this noise. And then he delivered the line that would end his career. You're a housekeeper. Your job is to clean things. So why are you so determined to make a mess? He smiled, satisfied. He leaned back, awaiting her answer, expecting tears, or perhaps a mumbled, defeated apology. He had made his point. The reporters had their story. Judge Duvall, the people's protector, school's ignorant protester. Josephine looked at Thomas. He was beet red, vibrating with a rage he couldn't unleash. She looked at the jury box, where Marigold Pierce was staring at her, pen frozen mid-word, an expression of stunned, rapacious interest on her face. Josephine took a deep, slow breath. She felt the knot of fear in her stomach finally, completely, unwind. It was replaced by a stillness so profound it felt like steel. She had spent 3 years fighting a monster in the dark, a faceless corporation represented by legions of slick, expensive lawyers. She had fought them from her kitchen table, after 12-hour days of scrubbing other people's floors, packing her son's lunch for the next day, and rubbing lotion into her raw, chapped hands. She had been in depositions where those lawyers had tried this exact tactic. They had called her the help. They had asked what a cleaning lady knew about amortization schedules and balloon payments. They had tried to make her feel small. They had failed. And now, here was the man at the very top of the system, the man holding her entire community's future in his hands, trying to do the same thing. Only this time, he was doing it in a room full of reporters. He was doing it on the record. He was doing it while presiding over a case he had a direct financial interest in. He hadn't just handed her a sword. He had handed her the whole armory. Josephine Carrington lifted her chin. She looked past the bench, past the robe, and directly into the eyes of André Duval. "Your Honor," Josephine said. Her voice did not tremble. It was not loud, but it was amplified by the microphone on the defendant's table, and it carried to every corner of the silent room. "You ask what I was protesting." Duval, still smug, nodded. "I did. I was protesting the Palmetto Prosperity Center," she said. "A center for job growth," Duval supplied, helpfully. "A center built and funded by Apex Holdings, LLC," Josephine continued, her voice gaining a cold, hard edge. "The same Apex Holdings that has illegally foreclosed on over 400 homes in this county, primarily in black-owned neighborhoods. The same Apex Holdings that is being sued in your court, Your Honor, for racketeering, fraud, and predatory lending. The same Apex Holdings that stole my mother's home." The room's atmosphere changed. The air crackled. This was no longer a simple citation. Duval's face tightened. The smirk didn't vanish, but it froze, becoming a brittle, ugly thing. "Ms. Carrington, your personal grievances, however colorful, have no bearing on—" "You asked me about my character, Your Honor," Josephine cut him off. And this time there was no "sir." "You asked me what a woman like me knows about the law." She took a step closer to the microphone. "My name is Josephine Eliza Carrington." She spoke her full name, the one her mother had given her, the one that was on the masthead of the most explosive lawsuit in South Carolina history. "I live at 1412 Gadsden Street. I am a graduate of Howard University with a degree in political science. I am, yes, a housekeeper. I clean the homes of some of the wealthiest people in this city. People who sit on boards, people who play golf with bankers. It is a job I am proud of. It pays my bills. It supports my son." She paused, letting her words sink in. "And I am also," she said, locking eyes with Duval, "the lead plaintiff in the class action lawsuit Carrington versus Apex Holdings, LLC. Case number 2023 CP10-0458. The case, Your Honor, that you are currently presiding over." Dead. Silence. It was the silence of a bomb falling. It was the silence of a world tilting off its axis. Judge Andre Duval's face went from smug to confused to a pale, sickly white. His mouth opened slightly. He was shuffling papers on his bench, his hands suddenly clumsy, his eyes darting around as if looking for an exit. He didn't recognize her. In all the months of filings, he had only ever seen her name on paper. He had never been in the room for her depositions. To him, Josephine Carrington was an abstract legal entity, a them. Not this. This woman in a cleaning uniform. The reporters in the gallery were statues. Marigold Pierce's jaw was literally hanging open. I... Duval stammered. But Josephine wasn't finished. "You asked me what I was protesting," she said, her voice rising with a righteous, controlled fire. "I was protesting the fact that Apex Holdings built that prosperity center on land they acquired through a fraudulent foreclosure. I was protesting because they are a criminal enterprise. And I was protesting because you, Your Honor, are overseeing the case against them while your family's investment firm, Duval Capital Partners, is one of their primary stakeholders." The bomb landed. The courtroom erupted. Marigold Pierce was on her feet, her phone held up, recording. "What did she say? What's the firm's name?" "Duval Capital Partners," another reporter yelled. The judge began banging his gavel, his face now a mask of pure primal panic. "Order! Order in this court! Ms. Carrington, you are out of line! You are in contempt!" "Am I, Your Honor?" Josephine asked, her voice ringing out over the chaos. "Or am I stating a fact? A fact that you were, by law, required to disclose? A fact that proves you are in clear violation of the Judicial Code of Conduct?" "Bailiff," Duval roared. But Thomas Morelli finally moved. He stepped up to the microphone, his own voice shaking with adrenaline. "Your Honor," Thomas shouted. "My name is Thomas Morelli. I am counsel for Ms. Carrington in this matter, and I am lead counsel in Carrington versus Apex. Everything my client has said is a matter of public record. And as of this moment, we are formally petitioning for your immediate recusal on the grounds of demonstrable public bias and a profound, undisclosed financial conflict of interest." Duval was white as a sheet. He looked at Josephine, truly seeing her for the first time. He wasn't seeing a maid. He was seeing the woman who was about to end him. The flashbulbs were like a strobe light now, capturing the judge's unraveling, capturing Josephine's calm, powerful stance. Duval stood up so fast his chair screeched back. "This hearing is concluded. Case dismissed," he yelled, his voice cracking. He turned and fled, robe flapping, through the door to his chambers, slamming it behind him. For a full 10 seconds the courtroom was stunned. Then, the entire press corps, as one, turned away from the empty bench and swarmed Josephine Carrington. The crush of bodies was immediate. Microphones, phones, and digital recorders were thrust into Josephine's face. The noise was a deafening roar of questions. "Ms. Carrington! Ms. Carrington, are you hurt?" "What's the name of his firm?" "Is it true? Duval Capital Partners?" "Ms. Pierce, Post and Courier. Can you spell that name?" "Did he know who you were when he said that?" "What did you feel when he mocked your job?" Josephine was momentarily overwhelmed, buffeted by the crowd. But Thomas Morelli, who was practically vibrating with the biggest legal victory of his life, put a protective arm in front of her. Everybody please, give her some space, Thomas yelled, shielding her. We will make a statement, but we are not doing it in this hallway. Back up, please. Miss Carrington. Marigold Pierce's voice was the sharpest. She had pushed her way to the front. You said he had a financial conflict. Can you prove it? We can, and we will, Thomas said, his voice booming with newfound confidence. We have the SEC filings. Duval Capital Partners, which is managed by the judge's brother, has a controlling interest in Low Country Development, LLC, and Low Country Development is the shell corporation Apex Holdings used to acquire the properties. It's all there. He never disclosed it. A collective gasp went through the press corps. This wasn't just bias. This was conspiracy. And now, Thomas continued, we have his bias. On the record, in front of all of you, mocking the lead plaintiff because of her station in life, a station he and his family have profited from suppressing. Josephine, Marigold called out, ignoring Thomas. Her eyes were locked on Josephine. What about you? What he said about your job? Josephine finally found her voice. She looked directly into Marigold's recording phone. Judge Duval, she said, her voice clear and strong, said I should focus on my job. He's right. My job is cleaning up messes, and he and Apex Holdings are the biggest mess this city has ever seen. I've been cleaning my whole life. I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty. It was the perfect soundbite. Marigold's eyes widened. She had her headline. We will be filing the emergency motion for recusal and a motion for sanctions with the Judicial Conduct Board within the hour, Thomas announced. No more questions. Two deputies, looking completely bewildered, finally pushed through. Folks, you have to clear the hallway. Let's go. Thomas guided Josephine through the parting sea of reporters. They didn't go back to the holding area. They went straight for the exit. As they burst through the oak doors and back onto the steps, the afternoon sun was blinding. The press corps followed, spilling out onto the sidewalk, still shouting questions. What now, Miss Carrington? Will this kill the Apex case? This saves the Apex case, Thomas called back over his shoulder. This ensures we get a fair trial. They hurried down the steps, past the four corners of law. As they reached the corner, Josephine finally stopped, taking her first real breath. Her legs felt weak. Josephine, are you okay? Thomas asked, his voice suddenly full of concern. I think so, she breathed. Thomas, what just happened? What just happened? Thomas said, a slow, disbelieving smile spreading across his face. Is that Andre Duval just handed us his own head on a platter, with a side of fries. He looked at her, his eyes filled with awe. Josephine, you were magnificent. I've never seen anything like it. You just took down a circuit court judge with nothing but the truth. Josephine looked back at the courthouse. The reporters were clustered on the steps, all on their phones, frantically typing. The story was already breaking. He didn't see me, Thomas, she said quietly. All he saw was a uniform. He saw a maid. He thought I was invisible. He sees you now, Thomas said grimly. The whole world is about to see you. A car horn honked. It was Josephine's son, Marcus, in their beat-up 15-year-old sedan. He was supposed to pick her up after the simple hearing. He was leaning over the passenger seat, his face a mask of confusion as he saw the cameras pointed at his mother. Josephine turned to Thomas. I have to go. I have to make dinner. Thomas stared at her for a second, then burst out laughing. Go, he said. Go make dinner, Miss Carrington. I'll go file a judicial atom bomb. Josephine nodded. She walked away from the swarm, opened the car door, and slid in. Mom, what is going on? Marcus asked, his 17-year-old eyes wide. Why are all those people... Josephine clicked her seatbelt. She looked at her son, the reason she fought so hard. She reached over and brushed his hair back from his forehead. It's a long story, baby, she said, a small, tired smile touching her lips. But I think we just won. To understand what happened in that courtroom, you had to understand the Polish. Josephine's hands were her resume. They were calloused at the pads of her fingers, the skin on her knuckles often dry and cracked, the nails cut short and practical. But they were meticulous. They knew things. They knew the feel of 800 thread count sheets. They knew the precise dilution of white vinegar and water to make a 19th century mirror gleam without streaking. They knew the smell of old money home, a mix of lemon oil, salt air, and the faintest, sweetest trace of decay. For 12 years since her husband died and left her with a mountain of medical debt and a 5-year-old son, Josephine had been a brighter day cleaning. She wasn't just the help. She was a professional. She managed the homes of Charleston's elite, and in those homes, she was a ghost. A silent, uniformed presence who saw everything. She saw the quiet addictions, the hushed-up affairs, the tear-stained pillowcases hidden in silk laundry hampers. She saw the stacks of unopened bills on mahogany desks and the desperate late-night glasses of whiskey. And she listened. She heard the conversations they had in front of her, as if she wasn't there. Andre says the Apex deal is going to print money. That was from one lawyer's wife, back in 2021. It's ethically gray, the lawyer had replied, but the holding companies are airtight. Duval's family firm is running the shell. It's brilliant, really. They're using the city's own revitalization grants to fund the buyouts. Josephine had been scrubbing a wine stain from a Persian rug, her blood running cold. Duval. Apex. She had heard the name Apex before. It was the company that had hounded her mother, calling her daily, offering to fix her roof. Her mother, proud and independent, had finally relented. The fix led to a lien. The lien to a foreclosure. The foreclosure to her death. Josephine started listening harder. She began her real work. After cleaning 10 hours a day, she would go home to her small rental apartment, put Marcus to bed, and then open her laptop. She looked up Duval Capital Partners. She looked up Low Country Development, LLC. She cross-referenced property records with the foreclosure notices she'd started collecting from her neighbors, from her church. She found the pattern. A web of shell companies, all leading back to Apex, and all targeting the same zip codes. She took her binder of research to Thomas Morelli, who was then a young lawyer working for a tiny legal aid clinic. He saw it. He saw her. He saw the case. Carrington vs. Apex was born. Her job became her advantage. She was the invisible woman, cleaning the homes of the very people who were part of the conspiracy. The turning point came 6 months before the hearing. She was cleaning the home office of a mid-level partner at one of the city's biggest law firms. He was careless. He'd left his home office unlocked, a stack of papers marked for the shredder next to his desk. Josephine was emptying his trash can when a name caught her eye. Apex Internal Memo. Her heart stopped. She knew she shouldn't. It was illegal. It was a violation of trust. But then she thought of her mother's house, of the for sale sign hammered into the lawn. She pulled the memo from the bin. It was wrinkled, stained with coffee. It was the smoking gun. The memo explicitly detailed the strategy of targeting pre-foreclosure and probate homes in historically black neighborhoods, using community outreach, pastors on their payroll, to build trust and secure repair contracts that were designed to be defaulted on. It was a written confession of their entire racist, predatory scheme. She slipped it into the pocket of her slacks. That night, she met Thomas at a 24-hour diner. She slid the memo, now in a plastic sleeve, across the table. Thomas read it. He reread it. His face went pale. "Josephine, how did you get this?" "It was in the trash," she said, which was technically true. This blows the case wide open," he whispered. "This proves intent. This proves everything." This memo was the apex brief Marigold Pierce had been shouting about on the courthouse steps. It was the brief that Judge Duvall was supposed to be ruling on, a brief that proved the criminality of a company his own family was funding. When Andre Duvall had looked at Josephine Carrington, he saw a cleaning lady. He saw a woman like you. He had no idea. He was looking at the woman who had already found his bones, catalogued them, and was just waiting for the right moment to put them on display. His courtroom, she thought. That was a fine place. He had built the display himself, right in front of the cameras. Her job was to clean. And she was, as she had told Marigold, very, very good at her job. While Josephine and Marcus were driving home, the J. Waddy's Waring Judicial Center was imploding. The moment Judge Duvall slammed his chamber door, his panic truly set in. He fumbled for his personal phone, not the court-issued one. He called his brother. "Robert, we have a problem. A massive problem." "Andre? What's wrong? You sound—" "Shut up and listen. The Apex case, the plaintiff, Carrington, she was in my courtroom, on a misdemeanor. I didn't recognize her. She was dressed like the staff." "What are you talking about?" I might have said some things about her job, and Robert, she knew. She knew about Duvall Capital. She said it, in open court, in front of reporters. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. "Andre, what did you say?" "It doesn't matter. What matters is the blowback. She's accusing me of conflict of interest. Bias." "Of course it's a conflict of interest, you idiot." His brother's voice was a low hiss. "I told you to recuse yourself the moment this case landed on your docket. I told you it was too risky. I'm a circuit judge. I don't run from cases. It would have looked suspicious." "It looks a hell of a lot more suspicious now. The press is there." "Yes, that Pierce woman from the Post." "Oh, God," Robert groaned. "Okay, stay in your chambers. Do not talk to anyone. Do not make a statement. I'm calling the lawyers." The line went dead. Andre Duvall sank into his high-backed leather chair. His hands were shaking. He, a Duvall, a man whose portrait would one day hang in this very building, was undone. By a housekeeper. He had built his entire identity on the clear, bright line between people like him and people like her. He was the order. She was the chaos. He was the mind. She was the labor. But in one 5-minute exchange, she had calmly, methodically, taken that line and strangled him with it. She had shown she had the mind, and he was just the chaos. Meanwhile, the hallway outside courtroom 2B was now the primary newsroom of the Charleston Post and Courier. Marigold Pierce was leaning against a pillar, her phone to her ear, dictating her story to her editor. "No, Greg, you're not hearing me. I'm not saying he's biased. I'm quoting him, directly. What do you have to protest? That your mop buckets are too heavy?" "Yes, I'm serious." And then she says, "I am the lead plaintiff in Carrington versus Apex." I know. It's the biggest story of the year. But Greg, that's not even the lead. She accused him on the record of a financial conflict. Duvall Capital Partners. Yes, that Duvall. His brother. She alleged they're the primary stakeholder in the shell corp Apex is using. If that's true, Greg, this isn't just a recusal. This is an impeachment. This is federal. She listened for a moment. "I'm uploading the video now. The clip of him saying, 'A woman like you' it's nuclear." And her answer, Greg, her answer was, it was legendary. The entire room just stopped. "Get a photo down here now. I'm staying. I'm going to find out everything about Josephine Carrington." The ripple effect was already spreading. By 4 p.m., the Chief Justice of the South Carolina Supreme Court had been alerted. By 4:30 p.m., the Post and Courier website had crashed from the traffic. By 5 p.m., Thomas Morelli had officially filed his 80-page emergency motion, which included a transcript of the memo Josephine had found, the SEC filings linking Duval Capital to Apex, and a sworn affidavit from Marigold Pierce detailing the events in the courtroom. By 6 p.m., the evening news led with it. The shaky phone video of Duval's smirk and Josephine's calm, powerful answer was playing on a loop. The story was no longer Judge Duval's big case. The story was Josephine Carrington. When Josephine got home, she and Marcus walked into their small, clean apartment. The smell of jasmine from the porch hung in the air. Her phone, a simple, prepaid smartphone, was sitting on the kitchen counter. It buzzed. And then buzzed again. And again. It was a text from her pastor. "Josephine, I just saw the news. We are praying. We are so proud." Another from her cousin in Atlanta. "Is this you, girl?" Another from Thomas. "Check your email. I sent you the filing. And don't answer your phone. It's going to get crazy. I'll handle all comms. You just be you." Marcus was staring at the local news affiliate on their small TV. "Mom." On the screen was her face, a still photo from the hearing, her chin up, her eyes locked forward. Next to it was a photo of Judge Duval, looking enraged. The Chiron read, "Judge mocked Black Maid, not knowing she was lead plaintiff in his biggest case." The title. The world now knew the title. Josephine watched it for a long moment. She felt a strange, quiet vindication. It wasn't triumph. It was just gravity. The weight of the world, which had been pressing her down, had finally shifted. She turned to her son. "Marcus, go wash up. I'm making spaghetti." He looked at her, bewildered. "Mom, you're on TV." "I know," she said, pulling the ground turkey from the fridge. "And that's fine, but we still have to eat." She was a housekeeper. She was a plaintiff. She was a mother. The work had to be done. The morning after the hearing, Andre Duval was suspended. The Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court issued a terse, one-sentence statement. Judge Andre Duval has been suspended from the bench, with pay, pending a full investigation by the Judicial Conduct Board. It was a stunningly fast downfall. But the evidence, thanks to Josephine's meticulous groundwork and Duval's public arrogance, was irrefutable. The Post and Courier front page was a masterpiece of journalistic evisceration. Marigold Pierce had forgone all subtlety. The headline, in a massive, bold font, was simply, "A woman like you." Below it, a side-by-side, Josephine, calm and dignified, in her work polo. Duval, his face a mask of smug contempt. The story was brutal. It laid out the Carrington versus Apex case, the predatory scheme, the stolen homes. And then it detailed, word for word, the exchange in the courtroom. It concluded with the explosive revelation of Duval Capital Partners and the conflict of interest. The city was on fire. For Andre Duval, the consequences were total. He was a pariah. His country club membership was under review. His wife, a prominent socialite, had reportedly decamped to their home in the mountains. The old money Charleston society that had insulated him his entire life was now horrified, not by his corruption, but by his clumsiness. He had been caught. He had humiliated them. The Judicial Conduct Board investigation was swift. Faced with the transcript of the hearing, the SEC filings, and the internal Apex memo that Thomas Morelli, citing whistleblower protection, had submitted, Duval's lawyers saw no way out. 2 weeks later, Andre Duval resigned from the bench in disgrace. But the reckoning was not over. The federal prosecutor, spurred by the public outcry and the rock-solid evidence Marigold Pierce had published, opened a criminal investigation. The Apex brief that Josephine had found was the key. It proved conspiracy. The investigation into Andre Duval's conflict of interest became a criminal probe into racketeering. His brother, Robert, was indicted. Andre himself, facing charges of conspiracy, mail fraud, and honest services fraud, took a plea. 6 months after he had mocked Josephine Carrington's job, Andre Duval, the man from a better world, was sentenced to 36 months in a low-security federal prison. For Josephine, life became surreal. She was, for a time, the most famous woman in South Carolina. She was invited on national news. Activist groups wanted her to be their spokesperson. A publisher offered her a book deal. She turned it all down. "I'm not a symbol," she told Thomas firmly. "I'm a plaintiff. I'm a housekeeper. I have a job to do. 2 jobs, in fact." She continued to work. Her high-end clients, to her surprise, mostly kept her. Some, she suspected, liked the notoriety of having that woman, the giant slayer, cleaning their silver. Others, she found, were quietly supportive. They'd seen the news, read the stories of her mother, and for the first time, they saw the woman who had been silently managing their homes for years. They started leaving larger tips. One client, the same lawyer whose trash had yielded the smoking gun, quietly paid to set up a college fund for her son, Marcus. He never mentioned the memo. He just said, "For his education. This city owes you." The most significant change, however, was in the case. With Duval gone, Carrington versus Apex was reassigned. The Supreme Court, in a move of profound symbolic power, assigned it to Judge Marigold Pierce. Not the reporter. Her mother. Judge Marigold Pierce, Sr., was a 68-year-old black woman, a pioneer of the state's legal system, and a woman who had faced 100 Andre Duvals in her lifetime, and had defeated them all. She was known for her brilliance, her meticulous reading of the law, and her absolute intolerance for corporate malfeasance. Apex Holdings, LLC, was terrified. Their motion to have the stolen memo thrown out was denied in a blistering 40-page ruling from Judge Pierce. Their attempts to delay were swatted down. The case was fast-tracked for trial. Apex, facing a new, incorruptible judge and a mountain of evidence, saw the writing on the wall. Their lawyers called Thomas Morelli. They wanted to settle. The settlement was the largest in South Carolina history. Apex Holdings, LLC, and its parent company, along with Duval Capital Partners, now in receivership, and their insurers, agreed to a 9-figure payout. $450 million. It was a staggering victory. The terms, hammered out by Thomas Morelli and a team of pro bono lawyers from a national firm who had joined the case, were transformative. First, every single one of the 412 properties that had been foreclosed on was to be returned to the families, with the titles cleared and all fraudulent liens dissolved. For homes that had already been resold, the families would receive the full current market value, plus damages. Second, a $100 million restitution and repair fund was established, managed by a community board, to repair the homes Apex had damaged and to provide grants for property taxes, ensuring the generational wealth could never be stolen that way again. Third, the remainder was to be paid out in punitive and emotional damages to the families of the victims. The victory was total. The day the settlement was announced, there was a celebration. It wasn't at a fancy hotel or a press club. It was in the basement of the Emmanuel AME Church, the same place where Josephine had held her first community meetings, armed with nothing but a binder and a cold, clear anger. The room was packed. It was hot, loud, and joyous. People were eating, crying, and hugging. The air smelled of fried chicken, collard greens, and sweet potato pie. Marigold Pierce, the reporter, was there, not as press, but as a guest. She had won a Pulitzer for her series on the Apex scandal. Tomas Morelli, now a partner at his own public interest firm, stood on a small folding chair and tried to get everyone's attention. I just want to say, he started, his voice thick with emotion, that this was never my fight. I was just the guy holding the briefcase. The real fight, the real victory, belongs to all of you, to the memory of your parents and your grandparents, and it belongs to the one woman who started it all, the woman who wouldn't be dismissed, my friend, Josephine Carrington. The room exploded in a standing ovation. People were cheering, whistling, stamping their feet. They all turned to Josephine, who was standing by the dessert table. She was not in her uniform. She was in her Sunday best, a simple, elegant lavender dress. She looked peaceful. She waved her hand, a little embarrassed, and picked up the pitcher of sweet tea. She walked over to Ms. Edna, one of the oldest victims of the Apex scam, who was sitting in her wheelchair, and refilled her cup. She wasn't giving a speech. She wasn't holding court. She was serving. Marigold Pierce walked over to her, notebook put away. "That was a hell of a thing, Josephine," she said quietly. "It was," Josephine agreed, smoothing the tablecloth. "It was a good, hard fight." "So, what's next for you? Governor? Congress?" Marigold smiled. "You've got the name recognition." Josephine looked at her, surprised, and then laughed. It was a full, genuine laugh. "Lord, no. What would I do in politics?" "So what? You're just going back to work? Back to cleaning?" Josephine finished pouring a cup of tea for a small child. She handed it to him with a smile. "I'm opening my own business," Josephine said. Marigold was intrigued. "A law firm? A consulting group?" "A Brighter Day Home Management," Josephine said, the pride clear in her voice. "Not just cleaning. I'm going to hire from this community. I'm going to train women to be home managers, to run payroll, to handle scheduling, to be professionals. I'm going to pay them a living wage, with benefits and 401ks, and we're going to get contracts with the city, with the corporations." She looked around the room, at the community she had saved. "It's not enough to just clean up one mess, Ms. Pierce. You have to build something better in its place, something clean, something that lasts." Marigold stared at her. This woman. She just never stopped. She had taken down a judge, toppled a corporation, and now she was going to revolutionize the service industry in her city. Josephine picked up the tea pitcher. "Excuse me," she said with a polite smile. "Ms. Edna needs a refill." She walked away, moving through the crowd, a queen in her own right, in a room she had built, in a city she was busy cleaning, one mess at a time. The story of Josephine Carrington and Andre Duval became a Charleston legend, a stark reminder of what happens when systemic arrogance collides with quiet, unyielding preparation. Judge Duval served his time and faded into obscurity, his family name forever stained. The Carrington vs. Apex settlement, however, triggered real change, leading to new state-level laws protecting homeowners from predatory lending. Josephine's home management company, A Brighter Day, became a wild success, a model for ethical employment. She never ran for office, but she never had to. She had proven that true power doesn't come from a gavel or a title. It comes from knowing your worth, speaking the truth, and never ever being afraid to clean up a mess. Thank you for watching. The story of Josephine is a powerful example of quiet courage. If you believe in the power of ordinary people to do extraordinary things, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share this story. Who in your life has shown this kind of strength? Let us know in the comments below.